When John Goodman first walked onto the set of Roseanne in 1988, no one could have predicted just how deeply the show would impact American television. Goodman stepped into the role of Dan Connor, a hard-working, blue-collar husband living paycheck to paycheck with his wife Roseanne and their children. At the time, sitcoms were filled with perfect families, fancy homes, and unrealistic lifestyles. Roseanne was different. It showed struggle, financial stress, and everyday problems that millions of viewers understood. John Goodman's performance played a huge role in making that realism believable. He didn't act like a sitcom dad. He felt like a real one. His warmth, humor, frustration, and loyalty made Dan Connor one of the most loved television fathers of all time. Behind the scenes, however, the show was never as calm as it appeared on screen. While audiences laughed every week, tension was quietly building. Creative disagreements, power struggles, and personal conflicts slowly turned the set into a difficult working environment. John Goodman, known for professionalism, often found himself caught in the middle. He cared deeply about the show and the people involved, but he also witnessed firsthand how fame and control could change relationships. As Roseanne became one of the highest-rated shows on television, the pressure increased, and so did the conflicts. John Goodman's own journey to success made him value stability and teamwork. His early life was filled with hardship. When he was just 2 years old, his father passed away suddenly from a heart attack. Growing up without a father left a deep emotional mark on him. His mother worked tirelessly to support the family, but the absence of a strong parental figure made Goodman's childhood lonely at times. These early struggles shaped his personality and gave him empathy, something that later showed clearly in his acting. Dan Connor wasn't just a role. It reflected much of what Goodman understood about responsibility, love, and sacrifice. As Roseanne grew in popularity, John Goodman became a household name. His performance earned him praise from critics and viewers alike. The show didn't just make people laugh. It made them feel seen. Families across the country recognized themselves in the Connors. This success, however, came at a cost. Fame brought long hours, stress, and public attention. Goodman also battled personal demons during this time, including alcoholism, which he later openly admitted affected his life and work. Despite these challenges, he never allowed his struggles to interfere with his performance, a fact that earned him great respect from colleagues. The early success of Roseanne created a powerful platform, but it also planted the seeds of future problems. As Roseanne Barr gained more creative control, the balance on set began to shift. Decisions were no longer made collectively, and tensions became harder to hide. John Goodman remained loyal to the show, believing in its message and importance. However, even he could sense that something fragile was forming beneath the surface. The laughter was real, but so were the cracks. This first chapter of the Roseanne story is important because it shows how something groundbreaking can also be unstable. John Goodman helped build a television classic, but he was also standing inside a system slowly moving toward collapse. The success that made Roseanne famous also created the pressure that would one day lead to its dramatic end. At the time, no one knew how it would all end, but the foundation for everything that followed was already in place as Roseanne moved into its second and third seasons. The show's success reached new heights, but so did the tension behind the scenes. What viewers saw on television was a loving but imperfect family, yet off camera, the working environment was becoming more complicated with each passing year. Roseanne Barr was no longer just the star of the show. She was becoming its driving force. With higher ratings came more influence, and Barr began demanding greater creative control over scripts, storylines, and even casting decisions. While some cast members accepted this as part of her vision, others quietly struggled with the changes. John Goodman found himself in a difficult position. He was deeply loyal to the show and grateful for the role that had changed his life, but he also valued fairness and collaboration. As tensions increased, Goodman often acted as a calming presence on set. Crew members later described him as respectful and steady, someone who tried to keep the focus on the work rather than the drama. Still, even his patience was tested as conflict became more public and harder to ignore. One of the earliest signs of trouble came when Roseanne Barr openly clashed with the show's original creator, Matt Williams. Williams had helped shape the early tone of the series, balancing humor with realism. However, Barr believed the show should reflect her personal views, and experiences more directly. Their disagreement escalated to the point where Barr reportedly threatened to leave the show if Williams remained involved. This created an uncomfortable situation for everyone. Losing either the star or the creator would have been disastrous, but the network ultimately sided with Barr. Matt Williams was pushed out, a decision that sent a clear message about who truly held power. John Goodman, along with several other cast members, supported Barr during this conflict, not necessarily because they agreed with everything she did, but because they feared the show would collapse without her. Goodman later reflected that the environment felt tense but unavoidable. The success of Roseanne depended on keeping the star happy, even if it meant sacrificing stability. This shift in power changed the atmosphere on set. Writers came and went, scripts were rewritten at the last minute, and fear of being fired became common. Despite the growing chaos, the show continued to succeed. Ratings remained strong, and audiences stayed loyal. Goodman's performance as Dan Connor remained the emotional backbone of the series. His character represented reason, patience, and moral grounding, qualities that stood in sharp contrast to the turmoil behind the scenes. Ironically, as the fictional family struggled through life's challenges, the real people creating the show were struggling even more. During this period, Goodman was also facing personal challenges. His battle with alcohol intensified as stress increased. Long hours, public pressure, and a tense work environment made it difficult for him to cope. He later admitted that he sometimes arrived on set hungover or drank during work hours. Still, his professionalism never wavered in front of the camera. Many co-workers were unaware of the depth of his struggle because he never allowed it to affect his performance. The combination of personal struggles and professional tension created an uneasy balance. The show survived, but the cracks were widening. While viewers continued to laugh, the people behind the scenes were walking on eggshells. John Goodman remained committed, believing the show was bigger than any one person. However, the cost of keeping Roseanne alive was becoming clearer with every season. This phase of the show's history is crucial to understanding what would eventually happen. The culture of control, fear, and unresolved conflict didn't disappear. It simply waited. And when the show returned years later, those same issues would resurface in a much more public and devastating way that Roseanne continued to the 1990s. John Goodman's fame reached a level he had never imagined. He was no longer just a television star. He was becoming one of the most respected actors in Hollywood. While still playing Dan Connor on television, Goodman began appearing in major films, working with famous directors, and proving his range as an actor. On the surface, it looked like he had everything: success, money, and admiration from audiences. But behind that success, Goodman was quietly struggling with personal issues that made this period of his life extremely difficult. The pressure of fame weighed heavily on him. Balancing a hit television show with film roles meant long hours and constant exhaustion. At the same time, the tense environment on the Roseanne set never truly improved. Creative control remained a sensitive issue, and last-minute script changes became common. John Goodman often had to adjust quickly, sometimes receiving new dialogue just hours before filming. While he handled these challenges professionally, the stress added up over time. During these years, Goodman's struggle with alcohol became more serious. He later admitted that drinking became a way to escape pressure, anxiety, and emotional pain. Though he never allowed his addiction to affect his work publicly, it took a toll on his health and personal life. He described feeling trapped in a cycle where success brought more pressure, and pressure led to unhealthy coping habits. Despite this, Goodman remained deeply committed to his role as Dan Connor. Understanding how much the character meant to viewers as the original run of Roseanne moved towards later seasons, the tone of the show began to change. Storylines became more experimental and, at times, controversial. Some fans felt the series had drifted away from the grounded realism that originally made it special. While the show was still popular, the magic of the early seasons was harder to recapture. John Goodman, though loyal, reportedly felt that the show had lost some of its emotional balance in 1997. Roseanne came to an end after 9 seasons. The final episode shocked audiences by revealing that much of the story had been fictionalized by Roseanne Connor herself. The twist was bold but divisive. Some viewers appreciated the creativity, while others felt confused or disappointed. For John Goodman, the ending was bittersweet. The role of Dan Connor had defined nearly a decade of his life, and saying goodbye was emotionally difficult. Still, he moved forward, focusing on film work and personal growth. After the show ended, Goodman continued to build an impressive career, but he also reached a turning point in his personal life. Over time, he recognized that his drinking was no longer manageable. With support from his family, he eventually sought help and committed to sobriety. In later interviews, he openly discussed how important that decision was, describing it as life-saving. His honesty earned him even greater respect from fans, who admired his willingness to confront his struggles. For many years, Roseanne seemed like a closed chapter. The show lived on through reruns, and Dan Connor remained an iconic television character. Few imagined the series would ever return. The conflicts, exhaustion, and emotional weight of the original run made a revival seem unlikely. John Goodman himself believed the story had been told and finished. Yet television history has a way of revisiting the past. As nostalgia grew stronger and networks searched for familiar names, conversations about a revival slowly began. What followed would reopen old wounds, reignite old tensions, and ultimately lead to the moment that truly ended Roseanne forever. And when that moment arrived, John Goodman would once again find himself at the center of a cultural storm, one far bigger and more damaging than anything the show had faced before in 2018, nearly 21 years after Roseanne originally ended. The show made an unexpected return. When the revival was announced, many people were skeptical. Reboots often fail to capture the magic of the original, and some fans worried the story had already been told. John Goodman, however, approached the revival with cautious optimism. Stepping back into the role of Dan Connor felt familiar to him, almost like putting on an old coat. From the first rehearsal, it was clear that his connection to the character had never faded. When the revival premiered in March 2018, the response was overwhelming. Millions of viewers tuned in, making it one of the highest-rated comedy premieres in years. Audiences were eager to see the Connor family again, older but still dealing with the same everyday struggles. John Goodman's performance was praised for its warmth and authenticity. He brought depth and calm to the show, grounding it emotionally and reminding viewers why Dan Connor had always been a heart of the series. Part of the revival's appeal was its willingness to address modern social and political issues. The show reflected the divided political climate in the United States, portraying Roseanne Connor as a supporter of then-President Donald Trump. This choice sparked debate, but also attracted viewers who felt their perspectives were rarely shown on television. For a brief moment, it seemed like Roseanne had successfully updated itself for a new era while staying true to its roots. Behind the scenes, however, familiar tensions remained. While production was smoother than in the past, there was still a sense that the show's stability depended heavily on Roseanne Barr's behavior. John Goodman and the rest of the cast focused on their work, hoping the revival could avoid the mistakes of the past. Unfortunately, that hope did not last long. On May 29th, 2018, everything changed. Roseanne Barr posted a tweet about Valerie Jarrett, a former advisor to President Barack Obama. The tweet compared Jarrett to an ape, a statement that was widely condemned as racist. Within minutes, outrage spread across social media. Fans, critics, and fellow celebrities expressed shock and anger. The tweet dominated headlines and quickly overshadowed the success of the revival. Roseanne Barr attempted to defend herself, claiming the comment was meant as a joke and blaming her behavior on the sleeping medication Ambien. Her explanation only made the situation worse. Even the drug's manufacturer publicly stated that racism was not a side effect of the medication. The backlash grew stronger, and the controversy reached a point where the network could no longer remain silent. ABC responded with stunning speed. Within hours, the network announced the immediate cancellation of Roseanne. The decision shocked the entertainment industry. The show had been one of ABC's biggest hits, and canceling it meant losing millions of dollars in advertising revenue. Still, the network stated that Barr's comments were inconsistent with its values and could not be ignored. For John Goodman, the cancellation was devastating. He had invested emotionally in the revival and believed it had the potential to last for years. In interviews, he admitted feeling heartbroken and deeply disappointed. While he initially defended Barr by saying he did not believe she was a racist, he also expressed sadness that one moment had destroyed the work of hundreds of people. Cast and crew members lost their jobs overnight, and a show that had returned in triumph ended in disgrace. This moment marked the true end of Roseanne as audiences knew it. The revival had proven the show was still powerful and relevant, but the controversy surrounding the tweet made its continuation impossible. For John Goodman, it was a painful reminder that success can vanish instantly, and that loyalty, even when genuine, cannot always protect something you love. After the sudden cancellation of Roseanne in May 2018, John Goodman found himself in an extremely difficult position. For decades, he had been closely linked to the show and to Roseanne Barr herself. Their on-screen marriage had become one of television's most recognizable partnerships, and their off-screen history was long and complicated. When the controversy erupted, many people waited to hear what Goodman would say. His response, however, was cautious, emotional, and deeply human that in the days immediately following cancellation. Goodman largely stayed silent. When reporters approached him outside an auto repair shop in New Orleans, he appeared uncomfortable and overwhelmed. Instead of making strong statements, he simply said he would rather say nothing than add to the trouble. That brief moment of silence spoke volumes. It showed a man caught between loyalty to a longtime colleague and the reality of a situation that had spiraled out of control. Goodman understood the seriousness of the controversy, but he also understood the person behind it. A few months later, Goodman broke his silence in an interview that surprised many people. He publicly defended Roseanne Barr, stating that he knew her personally and did not believe she was a racist. His comments immediately sparked debate. Some fans praised him for standing by someone he had known for years, while others criticized him for appearing to excuse behavior that many found unacceptable. Goodman did not deny that the tweet was wrong. Instead, he focused on the complexity of human relationships and the pain caused by the show's sudden end. Goodman also spoke openly about how deeply the cancellation affected him. He admitted feeling brokenhearted and depressed in the days that followed. The revival had represented a second chance, not just for the show, but for the entire cast and crew. Seeing it disappear overnight was emotionally crushing. For Goodman, the loss went beyond a job. It was a loss of a family he had helped build over decades. Despite the public debate surrounding his comments, Goodman eventually returned to television in a new form. ABC announced a spin-off titled The Conners, which would continue the story without Roseanne Barr. The decision was controversial, but offered a way forward for the rest of the cast and crew. John Goodman agreed to return as Dan Connor, once again stepping into a role that had defined much of his career. This time, however, the tone was different. The show acknowledged Roseanne Connor's absence and focused on moving forward. For Goodman, The Conners was both healing and bittersweet. While he was grateful to continue telling the family story, the circumstances were painful. The show existed because of a loss, and that reality was never far from his mind. Still, his performance remained strong, providing stability and emotional depth. Viewers praised him for carrying the series through a difficult transition. In later interviews, Goodman reflected on the controversy with greater distance and calm. He explained that he did not regret speaking honestly about his feelings at the time. For him, loyalty did not mean agreement. It meant acknowledging a shared history. He also made it clear that he understood why the network made its decision. Over time, he accepted that the situation was beyond anyone's control once the tweet had been posted. The end of Roseanne marked a defining moment in John Goodman's career. It revealed not only the fragility of success, but also the strength of his character. Through silence, honesty, and professionalism, he navigated one of the most public controversies in television history without bitterness. While Roseanne ended in chaos, Goodman's journey continued, shaped by experience, grounded in humility, and defined by resilience. When people ask what really ended Roseanne forever, the most common answer is simple: one tweet. Roseanne Barr's 2018 social media post was a direct cause of the show's sudden cancellation, and there is no denying its impact. But according to John Goodman's words and actions, the truth is more complex. The tweet was not the beginning of the end. It was a final spark that ignited years of unresolved tension, unchecked behavior, and a fragile system that had existed since the show's earliest days. In that sense, Roseanne did not fall because of one moment, but because of patterns that were never fully addressed. John Goodman never claimed that there was a hidden conspiracy or secret decision behind the scenes. What he revealed instead was something quieter but more powerful. That success without accountability is unstable. Through his interviews, Goodman made it clear that the environment surrounding Roseanne had always depended heavily on one person's actions. When that person crossed a line in a public and undeniable way, the structure collapsed instantly. The network did not just cancel a show. It chose to protect its values. Even at a high financial cost, Goodman's perspective helps explain why Roseanne could not be saved, even though it was wildly successful. The revival proved the show still had cultural power, strong ratings, and a loyal audience. Yet none of that was enough to outweigh the damage caused by the controversy. For Goodman, this was the hardest truth to accept. He understood the business decision, but emotionally, he mourned the loss of something deeply personal. His comments showed no anger toward the network, only sadness that so many people were affected by one irreversible mistake. By choosing honesty over outrage, John Goodman reshaped how the story of Roseanne would be remembered. Instead of fueling more division, he spoke about heartbreak, loyalty, and responsibility. He acknowledged his long relationship with Roseanne Barr, without defending the indefensible. That balance earned him respect from many who saw his response as thoughtful and human rather than political or performative. The creation of the Connors further confirmed what really ended Roseanne. The family, the stories, and the audience were never a problem. The show continued successfully without its original star, proving that viewers care about the characters and themes more than controversy. John Goodman's steady presence made that transition possible. As Dan Connor, he became the emotional bridge between the past and the future, allowing the legacy to continue without erasing history. In the end, Roseanne was not destroyed by cancel culture alone, nor was it the victim of a single bad decision. It ended because television, like society, has limits. John Goodman's reflections reveal that the show reached those limits long before 2018. The tweet simply forced a reckoning that had been delayed for decades. His calm, reflective response offered clarity in a moment filled with noise. Today, John Goodman's legacy stands separate from the controversy. He is remembered not only as a great actor, but as someone who handled an impossible situation with dignity. While Roseanne may be gone forever, the lessons from its rise and fall remain. And through his words, Goodman helped audiences understand that sometimes the real ending is not about scandal. It is about responsibility, consequences, and the cost of ignoring warning signs for too long. Even years after its final collapse, Roseanne continues to be discussed as one of the most influential sitcoms in television history. It broke rules, challenged comfort zones, and showed working-class life in a way few shows ever had. At the center of that legacy stands John Goodman, not as a controversial figure, but as a steady presence who represented consistency when everything else felt unstable. His portrayal of Dan Connor remains one of the most realistic and emotionally grounded performances ever seen in a sitcom. What made Goodman's contribution so powerful was not just his talent, but his restraint. He never tried to dominate the spotlight or reshape the show around himself. Instead, he focused on honesty, empathy, and realism. Even during moments of chaos behind the scenes, his performance never changed. Viewers trusted Dan Connor because John Goodman made him believable. That trust survived controversies, cancellations, and even the removal of the show's central figure in many ways. Goodman's reaction to the end of Roseanne reflects the values that made the show resonate in the first place. He did not shout, attack, or seek attention. He acknowledged pain, accepted consequences, and moved forward. In an industry often driven by outrage and extreme reactions, his calm response felt rare. It reminded audiences that maturity and accountability still matter, even in moments of public scandal. The continuation of the story to the Connors further proved that the heart of the original show was never just one person. It was about family, struggle, and survival. John Goodman's presence gave the spin-off emotional credibility. Without him, the transition would not have worked. His character became a symbol of endurance, someone who adapts, grieves, and keeps going despite loss. That message resonated deeply with viewers who had experienced change and uncertainty in their own lives. Looking back, what truly ended Roseanne was not hatred, politics, or ratings. It was the inability to separate personal behavior from professional responsibility. John Goodman's reflections helped make that clear. He never framed himself as a victim, nor did he shift blame. Instead, he acknowledged that actions have consequences, no matter how successful or beloved a show may be. That honesty adds depth to the show's legacy rather than diminishing it. Today, John Goodman continues to work steadily, respected across generations of actors and fans. His career stands as proof that longevity is built on discipline, humility, and growth. While Roseanne ended in controversy, Goodman's story did not. It evolved, and in doing so, it offered a quiet lesson that outlived the scandal itself.